Welcome to the KISC My Health radio show series on Building Fortunes Radio. KISC My Health is brought to you by the universally recognized Cranberry King, Captain Cranman, Stephen Lukawski. Over the past 30 years, Stephen has worked with North American dietary supplement companies in the nutraceutical industry. His efforts and connections generate ingredient sales through innovative delivery systems and effective marketing and brand management strategies. Today on KISC My Health, Stephen is joined by guest host Peter Mingils. Make sure you check out previous KISC My Health episodes at www.buildingfortunesradio.com or KISCMyHealth.com. Along with our marketing partners, we are here to help our customers improve their health, build their businesses, and make the world a better place. At KISC My Health, we know how much your health and your business means to you and the people important to you. So spread the word. Tell another friend. Join our newsletter and go make a difference in your world. Now, on to our show with your hosts, Captain Cranman and Peter Mingils. Take it away, Peter.
Hello, everyone. Peter Mingils here. You are listening to our KISC My Health radio show on the Building Fortunes Radio Network. My name, again, is Peter Mingils. We are here today with a really great interview. I can sense it already with Stephen Lukawski and a special guest, which we're going to let him introduce. But I'm going to go over a little bit of the background of the show because there's new listeners all the time that are listening in. And KISC My Health started off this way. In 2012, I was deciding that I wanted a podcast to be able to speak my mind, say the things that I think were interesting for other people. And we started Building Fortunes Radio. One of our guest speakers had his own thing going on. It was the Citizens for Health organization. Citizens.org is their website. And by the way, I hear somebody moving around, so they might have to stop moving around or just hit mute on their phone. So on the Citizens for Health, we had attorney Jim Turner who was here. And Jim Turner did a great job with weekly radio shows with us, and we talked about different and various things. They're exceptional. You can listen to him. And he became a mentor of mine. He was one of the original Ralph Nader Raiders, did an unbelievable job there. By the way, we still have a mover. We have a mover, so you got to stop moving so we can kind of hear you as you're moving around. So on the Building Fortunes Radio side, we did a decade's worth of radio shows on every Friday. But what happened with Jim Turner, as he passed away, left a hole in my heart and also in the radio show schedule. And I begged the people over at Citizens to do some replay. Well, we did replays for about a year, but I asked them to find me a replacement, which they eventually did. That was James Gormley. James Gormley was a great man, and you heard me use the word was, so if you're reading into this, you know it probably happened. But James Gormley, whoops, I got to mute out. I think I got to mute out somebody. Hold on 1 second. We have a mover. How the hell do I do this? Hold on 1 second. I'm going to mute, and I'm going to mute. Okay. So the scenario is that James Gormley did a couple of radio shows with us, and after doing a couple of radio shows with us, he asked, hey, can I have a guest? And I said, sure, who do you want? And he said, there's a gentleman, his name is Stephen Lukawski. Never heard of Stephen before. He said, he's Captain Cranman, the king of Cranberries. And I said, okay, that sounds like an interesting radio show. So we had Stephen Lukawski on. Stephen mentioned that he had a LinkedIn profile, so I went and joined his LinkedIn profile. And after we did that radio show, I was kind of fascinated with him, the topic of cranberries, but also the idea that he was a wonderful promoter, very creative, just an overall really great guy. And I kind of followed him for the next 6, 7, 8 months after the radio show. And then the unthinkable happened. James Gormley passed away. And that was sudden. I called up James and I said, I called up Stephen and I said, James Gormley had passed away. Stephen said to me, I know. I was working with him at the time. What a tragedy. And we both said that we have to do a radio show memorializing the James Gormleys of the world. And somewhere in the middle of that, I sprinkled in that I was writing a book on KISC, K-I-S-C. It stands for our Keep It Simple Circle Training, where, we do a lot of stuff with productivity and we help people kind of eliminate the distractions and all that sort of stuff. And Stephen jumped in and he said, I got it. Here's what we're going to do. What's that, Stephen? He says, we're going to run a radio show not only about James Gormley, but I know a lot of other people in this industry that need to be known, and they need their voices heard and their stories told because these are some of the best people on the planet. And we could do a radio show, let's call it KISC My Health. And I said, okay. So I bought KISCMyHealth.com because that was the natural thing, KISC, myhealth.com. You can go there to the other radio shows that we've done. But I said, Stephen, KISC for me stands for Keep It Simple Circle. What does KISC for you stand for? And he says, oh, piece of cake, Peter. It stands for Key Influencers Super Champions. And anybody who's been around Stephen knows that Captain Cran Man is kind of really cool looking. Now he's like Planet Cranberry and all that sort of stuff as well, so you got to check that stuff out. But I said, okay, so that's what we'll do. So we'll run these radio shows on the Keep It Simple Circle, or let's call it Keep It Simple, the Key Influence Super Champions. And sometimes we have people from Canada, and we call then it Key Influences Super Canadians. And sometimes we even have corporations, so we do Key Influencers Super Corporations as well. So having said that, we are here with a wonderful radio show. I want to thank our corporate sponsors. I want to say thanks to the people that listen in, and I want to certainly say thank yous to Stephen Lukawski as he goes through the stuff he's going to go through today, as well as all the other things that he does to make us have these wonderful radio shows. You can check it out on KISCMyHealth.com. So, Stephen, over to you, and I have to unmute your microphone now just in case you were the one that was making the noise, and there we go. So, Stephen, back to you.
Hello, Peter. Thank you so much, and hello to our audience out there. I don't think it's my phone that's making this noise.
I'm not sure if it's you or not. But I'm going to mute out the other gentleman. As you start talking, we'll find out if it's you or him, so go ahead.
Sounds good. How are we doing now?
You're good. I'm going to mute him out. So keep talking.
That's okay. Let's keep talking because we're having another amazing interview today, and we're reaching that 100th interview, which I'm so excited about, Peter. And this is all about a radio program that's not for profit. It's about acknowledging the leaders in the natural product industry. These leaders have paved the way for decades of sacrifices. They've taken their passion and their true grit, and they've accomplished so much that I've asked them to come on to the show to be an inspiration for the younger generations to follow their footsteps while they create their own. But we need leaders in the industry to inspire. So this show is dedicated to those that have moved on, and because I don't want them to be forgotten. Right? That it's important that we remember everyone that's had a great career, because without them, I don't think we would have jobs ourselves and we'd be able to do what we do. So everybody is ahead of me. I thank them so much because they've opened doors for me to be here, talking to the audience with you, Peter. And our show is supported by some great companies that said, Stephen, we want to follow you. We believe in what you're doing. You're giving back to the natural product industry. You're acknowledging the North Stars in the industry. No one's ever done that. And it's because it's not about selling products. It's not about selling services or companies. It's about the people, recognizing the accomplishments, how these people have made it through their life, both personally and professionally. And so thank you to our sponsor, Pure, Pure Brands, the organic sweetener company since 2008. We have also Joe Bradley and the Step Change Innovation team, Heather Wayner and Charlie's Angels, right over there. Thank you so much each week. They're posting every week the person that I'm interviewing. And once again, thank you so much for that help. And then, of course, we have Amidine Nutrition, the leaders in the beta-glucan space, that are now reaching out into the prebiotic world with the beta-glucan. And also, we look at the companies like RFI, who have been with us all this time, supporting us. And thank you, Jeff and Paulo over there, and Tricia, for the great work and support you've been doing for us, for the KISC radio show to be a success story. So thank you once again. Now, sit back and relax, right? Because this is going to be an amazing interview of inspiration, superpower. All right, you talk about defying all ages, all right, because I think that in our industry, there is no boundary. It doesn't matter. As long as you have a heartbeat and you have a passion, you can make a difference in this world. And our next guest is over 45 plus years in the natural product industry and still going strong, knowing that his best years are ahead of him. All right, I just am so thrilled to be able to welcome to the show a superhero, Bernie Landers. Bernie, for joining the show, KISC My Health.
Well, thank you, Stephen. It's a pleasure to be here. We've been friends a long time, but never had the chance to sit down and share our respective histories and the impact that they've made over these many years.
I thank you, Bernie, and I'm so excited to have and privileged to be able to be in the room with you, even though we're on the telephone together. Because we see each other at trade shows and we network together, but to have a sit-down fireside chat with you about your career makes me a better person just to hear your journey. So thank you for that time. But before we begin the interview, Bernie, we got to go for a commercial break with Pure Brands. Take it away, Peter.
Perfect. Here we go.
KISC My Health Radio welcomes our corporate sponsor, Pure Organic. What if reducing sugar didn't mean giving up the foods and drinks you love? That's the philosophy behind Pure, spelled P-Y-U-R-E, at pureorganic.com. Pure believes that if healthier food doesn't taste great, people simply won't stick with it. So they've created a full line of plant-based, organic, and organically sweetened sugar alternatives designed to deliver the sweetness you love without the sugar overload. From granulated sweeteners and liquid syrups to their powerful single-ingredient stevia extract, Pure makes it easy to sweeten your coffee, upgrade your recipes, and enjoy better choices without sacrificing flavor. And Pure is not just helping consumers at home. They also work behind the scenes with food, beverage, and supplement companies nationwide, helping brands reduce sugar while maintaining the taste, texture, and experience customers expect. With decades of expertise in food science and formulation, Pure is helping reshape the future of sweetness. Want to learn more about Pure? See their full line of products, discover their story, and explore what makes them different at pureorganic.com. That's P-Y-U-R-E organic.com. Visit pureorganic.com today and taste the future of sweetening. At KISC My Health Radio, we want to thank Pure for being our corporate sponsor. Now back to our show. Take it away, Peter.
Perfect. Stephen, take it away.
Thank you, Peter. And hello, everybody. From Planet Cranberry, Captain Cranman, I'm going to give you another amazing interview with Bernie Landers, all right, a veteran, a hero of mine in the industry, all right, an inspiration. I thank you so much, Bernie. Once again, welcome back to the show. For those who don't know who Bernie is, let me just quickly tell you that Bernie is the president and founder of Nutritional Products Consulting Group. He's been a leading innovator in the nutritional products industry since 1977. Over the years, he's consistently been at the forefront of major growth drivers in both functional food and dietary supplement sectors. Bernie has researched the cardiovascular and cognitive function improvements associated with functional foods and botanicals. Today, his global consultancy focuses on growth strategy, clinical research, and product development. Bernie is currently elected as a member of the American College of Nutrition, a member of the editorial advisory board of the Nutrition Business Journal, and the president's circle of advisors of the Botanical Council. He's authored and co-authored multiple papers in peer-reviewed journals and was recently granted a one-of-a-kind United States Act focusing on women's wellness. Job well done, Bernie. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Stephen. I've been busy. And opportunity and innovation never seems to take a day off. So I've been fortunate to be in the right place at the right time and to meet the right people who could share their passion with me and together extend their passion to higher levels than either of us had thought. And it goes back to 1977 with the innovative women's natural product training table at UCLA that pretty much set a standard for incorporating natural foods into the training of collegiate and Olympic athletes. So it's been an interesting ride, and the ride continues.
On 45 plus years of passion, true grit, dedication, all right, in the industry. You're my inspiration because you're showing me that your best years yet are still ahead of you, and you've accomplished so much up to now. And I think that's a wonderful legacy to leave behind in this industry and showing others.
Stephen, it's an interesting history that even precedes the nutrition industry. How I got into the nutrition industry was actually very accidental at the time. I was working with a colleague, and we were doing some of the early development work on virtual reality electronics. This was 1975. And for a variety of reasons, I moved from the East Coast, where I was working for my father's fiber optic entertainment light business, and moved to California and struck up a friendship with a fellow who at the time was a world powerlifting champion, and whose platform for his championship was optimized nutrition, nutritional quality, and fewer dietary supplements at the time. So we got together, and back in 1977, we created the first undiet, which was a simple concept that said, no matter how many different diets there are, there's always going to be another diet, but the simple answer to long-term good health and vitality is to eat whole foods in a good balance. We didn't have organic back in 1977, but to eat whole foods and get moderate exercise. And so we were in the process of presenting the undiet to the very few people who were interested, because most everyone in those years only wanted a diet. So as a last gasp, we presented the idea to the women's athletic department at UCLA, where we knew the women's track coach and the head trainer. And they gave us an opportunity to gather together all of the leading natural food companies in Southern California and actually replace the foods the girls were eating with natural foods. And it became a nationally known program, and it preceded everything else that came after. So it was an interesting beginning, very different from what I had imagined a few years earlier, but for my own well-being, totally appropriate and opportunistic.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Let's go back in time here, Bernie. So before 1997 or 1977, okay? Let's go back to the topics of let's tell the world right now who are listening where you were born and what your childhood was like growing up.
Well, I was born in New York City in the days when New York City was New York City. I grew up in Queens, and my childhood was probably the most idyllic you could imagine. Life centered around the schoolyard, around long walks, around going to the old New York World's Fair grounds, where you could roller skate, you could play ball, you could pretty much do anything you wanted without any constraints and distractions. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have computers. We had schoolyards. And when we weren't in the schoolyard, my parents were fervent believers in education. So my mother was a voracious reader. So I spent a good portion of my non-schoolyard growing up years reading books like landmark books or Tom Swift or the Hardy Boys, and spent a good portion of that time in my own imagination without any requirements to do anything other than to go to school, and do your homework and have a pleasant childhood. So I was very fortunate. It was the early 1950s, the mid-1950s. The Yankees were the champions every year. Everything was predictable. The New York Times was also predictable, and we got 10 cents per day if we would read the entire New York Times and then answer questions. And if we answered all 10 questions correctly, we would receive our allotment of 10 cents. So we grew up, and I grew up in a wonderful, free environment with no constraints whatsoever. And it was a wonderful place to develop a fertile imagination, which I did because I had no other particular goal in life other than to be Superman, Batman, or the Flash, if it turned out to be the case, or to be Mickey Mantle, or to be Frank Gifford, or one of the great athletes of all time. And that was pretty much the way life was. We lived in an area where the schools were good. You could go to elementary school and the teacher would know you by name. You could go to junior high school in the years where you could skip a grade if you were so inclined and so talented. I chose not to. I played on the softball team, and I got to high school. I played on the football team. Everything about life growing up in New York was tradition, learning, and sports. And there was no stress. It was a stress-free life. So I got a great education. I learned how to use my imagination in countless different ways. Then when I got older, all I had to do was to draw on those things I'd imagined for all those years growing up. And it turned out the only thing I hadn't imagined was a career in the nutrition industry. But that's where it wound up. So, and we grew up with very strong values. My father had fought in World War II on Guadalcanal, so we were staunch patriots. My mother was the producer of the first radio talk show on nutrition. It was the Carlton Frederick Show. So even though nutrition wasn't the center, we had the polyvisol liquid vitamins, and there was always sort of that overtone of nutrition without really understanding what it was, because my mother was very careful about what we ate. My father, not so much so. He always had a supply of Nestle's Crunch Bars in the refrigerator. But again, it was a wonderful childhood. We got a great education. We got to play endlessly. Most nights in the summer, we'd be out in the schoolyard until the street lights went out. So that was pretty much what growing up was like.
Wow. So what school did you go to in New York and Queens?
I went to Stuyvesant. Well, I went to PS 175, the public school. Then in the 7th and 8th grade and 9th grade, I went to Stephen Halsey. That was in Queens. And then in high school, I went to Stuyvesant High School, which was one of the 3 academic high schools in the city. And we joke about it. There was Bronx Science. That was for the mathematicians. You have to take tests to get into all of these. I didn't know that. I went there to play football at Stuyvesant. But Bronx Science was for mathematicians. Brooklyn Tech was the second one. It was for engineers. And then there was Stuyvesant, which I tell people was for white-collar criminals. And so they were great. And going to one of those colleges or one of those high schools gave you a leg up in pretty much going to whatever college you wanted to. The only problem was that to get in the top half of the class, you needed to have straight A's. So it was challenging, and you had to take the subway to get there, and life was disciplined, to say the least. But the education that we came away with was a wonderful foundation. And then I wanted to continue playing football, even though I wasn't that great at it, but I was offered a scholarship to the University of Delaware. It was a little small college where I played, only a year and a half before injuries slowed me down. And then, life took a turn, and I wound up, let's just say I wound up in the role of parent long before I had anticipated it. And so worked my way through college in a local rubber hose factory called the Electric Hose and Rubber Company. And then when I got out of undergraduate school, I went to work for the Wilmington Trust Company. It was the largest bank, because they thought it was wonderful that somebody who graduated college actually had some work experience. So I stayed there through graduate school. I got my master's degree, and then went to work for the DuPont Company, because everybody in Delaware who went to the university and had a business degree hoped to, and most often was able to, get employed by E.I. DuPont de Nemours. So they didn't know what they wanted to do with me. I was a marketing student at the time, and they asked me what I could do if I worked there, and I said, well, I'm fully qualified to run the company. They said, well, thanks, we just hired somebody for that job, but why don't you go into sales training? I said, well, I'm not a salesman. They said, yeah, we don't know what else to do with you. We want to hire you. So they put me through the training course, which was a whole other story. And then because they had no idea where to send me, they sent me to California to call on customers who they really didn't want to do business with, but who they wanted to convince that they did. And so when I got out of graduate school the first time in 1974, I wound up in California. And for a New York boy who's never been to California and lands in California and gets off the plane, it's pretty much a fait accompli as to where you're going to wind up. So I stayed there for a while and went to work for my father eventually, who was making a fortune selling fiber optic lamps to Spencer Gifts in the 70s, and then got involved, as I said, in sort of roundaboutly in doing some of the first research on virtual reality electronics. We created something, myself and a partner at the time, this is another story as well, created something called Sensorium, which was the first room that you could go into to create an artificial environment. Well, that lasted a few years, and then I had the urge to go back to California, which I did. And when I got back to California, I had formed a close friendship with my athlete friend, and we decided that my career would then take two directions. One, to save the world with virtual reality, and the other to save the world with better nutrition. And from that point forth, the majority of my time over these last 49 years has been on the cutting edge of nutritional products. Not just natural products, but nutritional products, starting in 1978 when I went to work for a fellow named Jay Patrick, who was the founder of Alicer, which was the company that developed Emergency as a powder drink mix. And Stephen, that's where our paths, I think, originally crossed 20 years later when we were producing Emergency Cranberry, which was one of the first crossover dietary supplements. But I stayed there for a while. I got involved with the bicycle race across America in 1984. Established with a friend of mine a world record on a tandem bike for 24 hours on a track, and then shortly thereafter moved on to a full-time role at Health Valley Foods, which you probably remember, which was the pioneer in natural foods and a participant in our women's training table. But shortly thereafter, I went to a annual meeting of USDA and FDA where they presented breakthroughs in nutrition, and met a fellow by the name of Bob Kowalski. And Bob was a bit of a chatterbox. He was a medical writer, and so he was there, looking for breakthroughs. And he wouldn't shut up, and nobody else would talk to him, so I did. And he said, I've had all these heart attacks, and I have high cholesterol, and I found the secret to lowering cholesterol. I said, well, that's good, Bob. What's that? He said, well, I eat oat bran. I said, well, okay. He said, yeah, and I'm writing a book called The 8-Week Cholesterol Cure. I said, well, that's nice. He said, yeah, Random House is going to publish it, and they think it's going to be a big deal. So I went back to the owner of Health Valley, George Metallion, and I said, George, we need to be in the oat bran business. He said, why? I said, well, this guy's writing a book, and the federal government has decided that cholesterol is a really bad thing, so they have this cholesterol education program. And historically, whenever the government decides something is bad, like with salt, the market opens up for natural foods that either don't have that particular demon or they have some other unique deity that people believe they should only eat exclusively or never, sort of like a pendulum. He said, okay, we'll make some oat bran flakes. Well, as we have it, Kowalski's book became one of the best-selling books in the history of Random House. Oat bran became the next big thing in nutrition. Nobody had any because Quaker was paying truckers to haul it off and feed it to the animals, and Health Valley cornered the market, and through the next 6 months grew the business from annual revenue of $12 million to $140 million. So we were on our way, and that led to multiple clinical studies that I developed and oversaw with Texas A&M University, then at other universities. And it went on from there until oat bran died in 1989. And all of a sudden, fat became the new demon, where oat bran had been the great panacea. So this was the way my life went. And, I grew up with no idea that any of this would ever be a direction. But because I didn't grow up with a mandate to be a doctor or a lawyer, like just about everyone else in my family, I was pretty much left to follow my follow the winds wherever they blew, and away they went. So anyway, that's a very long answer to a very short question. But,
well, you know what? I'm going to congratulate your parents on that, right? Because they let you be who you wanted to be. They didn't, try to force you to become someone you're not, right? And you had to.
They always gave us opportunities.
Yeah,
Stephen. Like when I was 9 years old, my mother wrote a musical score that was performed at the United Nations UNICEF, and it was called Brotherhood. So, not only was I doing all these other things, but we were getting a worldview of how the world was supposed to be. And I still have the audio tapes of this thing and all of the pictures of presenting at UNICEF this thing called Brotherhood. And so, there was always a tangible attachment to the real world in a very positive way, and always the belief that things could be better if only people would get along. So it's just a very unique life journey that probably couldn't have wound up any other way than the way it did, because the goal of my life was always to do as much good as I could and cause as little harm as possible in doing it.
Mm-hmm. And I think looking for the good in other people along the way. All right, because I know that our education doesn't teach to look for good in everybody, not in the business world at least. Right, so it has to come from your value system with your mom and dad, right? But what was Yeah, so talk a little bit about your value system that you learned from your mom and dad during your childhood that you brought into the business world.
Well, I learned about the value of education, the value of being kind to people, the value of hard work and discipline, and those were really the overreaching values. You work hard, you do the right thing, and my brother wasn't as well behaved as I was, and he had a few skirmishes with the authorities when he was growing up, and his penalty was he had to write a phrase 10,000 times relating to not duplicating his prior behavior. So not only was I inspired to do good, I never wanted to have to write anything 10,000 times. So there was always a penalty if you wavered, but the reward was enormous. And I loved work. I loved the idea that if you did something for somebody, that sometimes they would give you money for doing it. So you ask in the questions, what was my first job? There was a job in Forest Hills that was the most sought-after job in the entire community. It was putting together the Sunday newspapers at the local candy store, for which you would be paid $5 and have the freedom to stand behind the soda fountain once you were done. Well, that job was sought after beyond any other, especially because they were young. So for the $5, I put together papers for weeks and saved the $5 and bought my mother a robe. So, I mean, I always was focused on seeing other people become happier through some work that I could do or some effort I could make. I mean, that was, to me, that was the greatest reward, not having, a new pair of sneakers or some other possession, because, if I had one pair of shoes, I was happy. And when they wore out, then I'd get another. But that was before fashion. We had Keds or Converse, and that was it. Everybody had the same shoes. So, that's where the values came from, and they persisted. My parents were older. My mom was 36. My dad was 43 when I was born. So they had already gone through the trials and tribulations of youth, and they were much more stable and situated. And I think that was an enormous benefit for me because it gave me stability, whereas I didn't have to worry about their lives being chaotic.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you lived in a simple era at that time. And it seems as a child, in your childhood, it was less choices and less complications at that point.
The only regret I have, and you'll laugh at this, is that when we were kids, we used to collect baseball cards and flip them against the wall, Yep. And I must have flipped away probably between $3 and $5 million in baseball cards if I'd kept them, including the Mickey Mantle cards. And so anyway, hindsight.
Bernie, it could be worse. You could have been like me, where you put stickers on the cards, and then you keep your cards your whole life, and then you look at it every day, and you go, "Why did I do that? Right? Why? Why did I destroy my cards?"
The quality of you. What did we know? They were good for two things. They were good for flipping, and they were good for making your bicycle, if you had one, sound like a motorcycle. So that was it. So anyway.
Well, no. We look back. I think your childhood, is some did not have a very good childhood, and but I don't let the childhood or my parents define who I am. I think we learn from our parents, good and bad. It's up to us, I think, to take that learning experience and grow and become our own person. And they gave us life, and it's up to us to do the best we can with what we have. And certainly you have done, like now, when did you have your firstborn? At what age?
I was 19.
So you had a son or daughter?
I had 2 sons before I realized how the first one came about. See, one of the problems growing up in that kind of a disciplined environment is my dad told me there was time for dating later. And later never came. And so biology was not my strongest course in high school. But, anyway, I was 19. And up until that time, strangely enough, I was a horrible college student. I was on the verge of being expelled up until the middle of my sophomore year. And from that point forth, I was on Dean's List every single semester until I graduated. Was offered a fellowship at Wharton when I graduated as an undergraduate, and because it didn't pay enough, I went ahead and took a job working in one of the largest banks in the world, and gained experience that I otherwise never would have had. So, sometimes life throws you a curve, and if you allow that curve to dominate your life as opposed to direct your life, you can lose the value of what I look back on as being a gift. So anyway, so that's that. And life goes on. But
now, Bernie, during your schooling, your college, do you remember? Like I remember a couple of my teachers. All right, do you remember a couple teachers that stood out that really you look back and you go, wow, they sort of mentored me in a way. They pointed me in the right direction, right? Or they gave me encouragement.
Well, in New York in those years, the kids who had greater academic potential were segregated, so they had class like 6-1 through 6-12. And I was fortunate in that the 6-1 or 5-1 or 4-1 classes always had what were the best teachers. And so my elementary school teacher, Mrs. Greenhut, was a tremendous influence. Not only that, my mother worked in the principal's office, so I had motivation to stay on the straight and narrow and do well. When I got to junior high school, Mr. Hampton S. Williams was the music teacher, and one of the most wonderful, unique individuals I've ever met. He organized the a cappella choir, and I got to be a member of that choir. But he was, through his music and through his discipline and his love, everyone in that choir, and he's also my homeroom teacher, surpassed any expectations that anyone had for either the choir or for their schooling. And in my 8th year, we were all part of the All New York City Choir, and we performed at Queens College, each of the school choirs separately, and then the All City Choir together. And we stood on a stage at Queens College that elevated from below to above, so we all were standing on the stage as the orchestra started playing the score from the Hallelujah Chorus. And so you talk about events. I still have the recording of the All New York City Choir led by Mr. Hampton S. Williams singing the Hallelujah Chorus. And, things like that stand out as you grow up. And sports things, a few teachers stood out in sports because we had coaches and we had, some unique characters, not as influential as the ones earlier on. We had a coach in college, our freshman football coach, Coach Paul Billy, who was the wrestling coach. And as we were on the bus heading to play the Army prep school in football, he got up and he said, "Men," he said, "this Bullis prep team is big and they're fast." He said, "We're not big, but we sure are slow." And so you had crazy things like that, things that stand out, sports things where you hit a home run, or, performance things where you set a world record, or business things where you happen onto somebody who gives you an insight that leads a company to grow 1,000% in 6 months. You just never know. And I think that's the wonderful thing about growing up with a fertile imagination, is everything is possible. And nothing you could ever suggest could be impossible. So when, opportunities come along in the nutrition field, the first question you ask is, what if? And the second is, why not? And if you operate from there, and Stephen, you do that all the time, that gives you a beacon that you can follow through all the work you do for all the different clients or employers or projects that you work on.
Yeah, thank you, Bernie. What if, and why not? All right, those. I looked at those, and I said, the only person stopping me is myself, right? And if I have no vision, like you just mentioned, if I have no creativity, if I have no desire or fire in the belly, all right, to make a difference, then I think I'm wasting life. It's like I'm meant to step out of my comfort zone. I'm meant to live an uncomfortable life in the sense of ambition and creativity and climb that stairway to heaven. All right, with and making a difference in people's lives with what we do. Because I think that's why you and I are in this business, all right, to help others succeed, but also to help the consumer live a longer and healthier life with the products that we bring to market. All right, so
for us, Stephen, I think also you probably agree, we take what we make because usually that's the best form of whatever is out there. At least, when you're dealing with functional foods and you're dealing with complex dietary supplement formulations, there's two directions that the market generally takes. One is what I call better sameness. We're doing the same thing everybody else does, and for whatever reason, we've got a better price, we've got a prettier package, what have you. Or on the other end is innovation. Going like in Star Trek, going boldly where no man has gone before. What I find is that requires one final element, and that's patience, and understanding that vision isn't always immediate. Sometimes your vision can be 10 or 15 or 20 years ahead of the curve, and if you hang on to your beliefs and your visions, and your commitment to them, and you live long enough, eventually they will come to pass, because those of us like you, like me, who have history and who have vision are able to see forward where other people can only see where things are right now. It's kind of like you're Canadian, so don't take this the wrong way. Wayne Gretzky is the greatest hockey player of all time. There's nobody, even now, he's still seen as the greatest hockey player. And he was asked how it was that he was so great, and he said, well, all the other players skate to where the puck is, and I skate to where the puck is going. And on the surface, that makes sense. But what I found is that that's not really the whole story. Because knowing where the puck is gives you no ability to project where it's headed unless you know where it was before it got to where it is. And so what I found is that the history of our industry, and that's what I wrote this book about, goes back hundreds of years to recent history, to James Salisbury, who came up with the Salisbury steak because he determined that eating only one food was the solution to people's problems. And Sylvester Graham, who came up with the graham cracker because he thought the same thing, that only whole grains could be the answer to people's well-being. And they shouldn't eat meat at all. But if you track history, it goes all the way back to the Roman Colosseum and what the gladiators had, because they had very specific functional diets. And if you track the history of the regulations in our industry, there is a fascinating history of how they came about. They didn't just wake up one day and have the Dietary Supplement Act. There was a whole historical progression of the industry that goes way back probably to the early 1900s, to the Pure Food and Drug Act and things of that sort. So again, having a historical perspective for those of us who have it gives us a leg up on seeing where things are headed, so we can conceive innovative ideas, as opposed to if only know where things are, it's really hard to know where things may be headed. So I think those are, there are additional elements to what value we bring to the industry, and in having these kinds of conversations where we can exchange our experience and our vision, where we have complementary histories and complementary understanding of how everything got to where it is. It lays the groundwork for some of the great collaborative efforts that our industry has seen, because eventually the next big thing only lasts 4 years. And then there's a new next big thing. So 1 year it's a demon, 1 year it's a deity, then another year the deity becomes a demon, and the demon goes back and forth, and it never settles. And so these kinds of paths and these kinds of historical trends are extremely important to understand, and I think is missing from a lot of the younger people that come into our industry, that they don't have a good foundation in history, either in science or in regulations, or just in terms of product development, demons and deities. So sorry to bend your ear, but
yeah, no. I'll even add social skills. Social skills, all right, are lacking, and for a lot of these younger people, all right, they can't. You and I got out. We met people, all right. We spent the hours networking. After the trade shows were over, we built relationships over all these years. We still are. Right? It's things that in our life didn't happen because it came to us. We went out there and made our own bed. Right? And,
we weren't burdened by cell phones in the early years. We weren't burdened by laptop computers. When we went to trade shows, we actually met and interacted with people who we had personal relationships with. And at the end of the show, health food stores would back their trucks up into the hall, and they would take as many free samples as they could get their hands on. It was a different time. And that kind of experience predisposes us to put greater value on personal relationships than the younger entries into our industry do or are able to, because there's just no way to have a 20-year relationship if you're in the industry for 2 years. It just doesn't work.
No. And I always say, too, for the younger people listening to Bernie and I, right, find a mentor. Find someone that you can learn from. And when you look back and still to this day, Bernie, is there any person that was a mentor to you that stands out in the nutrition industry that you like to recognize?
Well, there were a couple. When I got to Health Valley, there was a fellow named Goldie Goldenfield. Goldie was the regulatory consultant. And he taught me about the importance not only of understanding the regulations, but how to read every new regulation by starting with the preamble. Because in the preamble, you would have the history of how the regulation came about and the reason that that regulation was ultimately put forward. He also, and Scott Bass, who you probably are familiar with, was the lead attorney for the National Nutritional Foods Association. And Scott taught me that the government is not necessarily your enemy, that if you understood how to collaborate with the government, that you could accomplish amazing things if you didn't treat them only as a combatant. And so that's why any number of times when regulation shifted to the benefit of Health Valley Foods, it was because we went to the FDA or the USDA and we said, we'd like your insight about how we address this problem. And as often as not, because we're always on the cutting edge, their answer would be, well, we don't know right now. To which our answer would be, let us help you. And that's how we wound up defining fat-free. Later on, it's how we actually pioneered the functional water category, and how we came up with the descriptor healthy, which at the time in 1995, Health Valley was the only company on the face of the earth who had a complete product line that complied with the definition of healthy. And the reason it did is because we wrote the definition. And so even Healthy Choice couldn't call their product healthy anymore. So Scott Bass made a huge impact, and Goldie Goldenfield. And, you know, along the way, there were others in the research community. I got to know Dr. Colin Campbell quite well, who is really the founder of the vegetarian movement. Dr. Joanne Lupton, who was a member of the National Academy when she was still thankfully alive at Texas A&M University, and helped to guide the development of clinical trials. There were so many people through the years, but these were the ones that taught me not what to think, but how to think, and not what to do, but to how to go about getting things done. And those were remarkable insights that were it not for them and that way of looking at things, I don't know that much of what I ever accomplished would have been accomplished.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that with us. You know, we're going to break for a commercial now here, Bernie, but when we come back, I want to talk about your company, what you do every day. I want to talk about leadership qualities that you know, make a great leader, and I want to talk a little bit about MLM, all right, for the MLM listeners out there. So, Peter, take it away to Joe Bradley and the Step Change Innovation team.
Here we go. Well, Step Change Innovations is the company. StepChange.go is the domain name. Here we go.
Here's a word from our sponsor, Step Change Innovations. Selling science-backed ingredients is tough. No one understands that better than industry veteran Joe Bradley. For over 20 years, Joe has blazed trails in selling science-backed ingredients into emerging markets. He's seen the challenges firsthand. The long sales cycles, the regulatory maze, and the struggle to turn groundbreaking science into retail success. That's why he dedicated his career to overcoming these hurdles. At Step Change Innovations, we're on a mission to make that journey easier for you. Whether you need expert regulatory guidance, a launch strategy that transforms your ingredient into a premium consumer product, or an outsourced sales program that fills your pipeline with quality leads, we've got you covered. Imagine your innovative ingredient not just as an idea, but as a proven, market-ready product, displayed on shelves, building trust with every customer, and driving real sales. With our deep industry expertise and a robust network of suppliers, retailers, and co-manufacturers, we turn challenges into opportunities and accelerate your path to market. If selling your science-backed ingredient feels like an uphill battle, let's change that. Schedule a conversation with Joe Bradley to talk through your sales challenges and brainstorm ways to overcome them. Whether it's refining your strategy, securing retail placement, or building a sales pipeline that actually delivers, we're here to help. Visit stepchangego.com to connect today and take the first step toward getting your ingredient on shelves faster and easier. At KISC My Health Radio, we say thank you to Step Change Innovations for being the sponsor of this podcast. Now back to our show. Take it away, Peter.
And we're back. Peter Mingils here with Stephen Lukawski and Bernie Landis, and we are talking about different and various things here. Stephen, kick it off again.
Yes, thank you, Peter. And for those who just are joining us on KISC My Health Radio, we have Bernie Landis here. And Bernie, with 45-plus years of industry experience, guiding you and giving you advice, inspiring us with his story and all his accomplishments, and we're going to learn all about his business now, called Nutrition Consulting Group. All right, so Bernie, tell us about what your business model was when you set this up, and what you do every day.
So my model was that innovation in the nutrition industry is not a one-person undertaking. So the idea was to create a network that was populated by unique individuals across the entire spectrum of skills and experience that would be applicable to any number of different projects, and not necessarily all to the same. So it's an informal network made up of scientists, contract manufacturers, marketing people, all of whom I've worked with successfully over the years, and I act as a hub. So if a client comes to me, I certainly have my own experience and capabilities, but if a client comes to me or I develop a client who has a strategy that they've already worked out and they want to bring together a suite of tools to help to achieve their goal, I can do that, whether it be ingredients or packaging or manufacturing or any number of different elements. It can even be somebody who's into regenerative growing, an entire spectrum. And I actually laid out my view of how this should work in an article that was just published on or in Whole Foods magazine. It's called The End of Scientific Advisory Boards and the Birth of Innovation Advisory Boards. And the logic behind that is that scientific advisory boards are somewhat limited. Often they're looking backwards to confirm what's already been discovered, whereas innovation advisory boards do some of that, but they're also looking for the road less traveled and all of the different elements that go into a successful new venture in the future. And that could be everything from an ingredient, a growing method, a packaging format, a delivery system, any number of a marketing approach, such as the one you've developed right here. And that's what my days look like, in addition to the fact that I'm finalizing my book about the changing nature of nutrition advice. And then I have a second book I want to work on. It's called Great Success Stories in the History of Failure, which is basically a look back on some of the great opportunities that, but for a few missteps or changes in the environment could have been the next big thing. And some of them have recycled back again, but there are some really interesting stories about how great companies fell and how companies that had never risen rose to prominence in a time and in a way that was completely unexpected. So I do that, and that pretty much keeps me occupied. I do a fair amount of product development, but in the innovation space. So I use the resources that I've gathered together in this network to create products that are not the same, but actually superior in different ways. So it may be that you're reactivating a basic dysfunction in the human biology, which is one thing that I've worked on, which is interesting because, there are certain things human body can't do. It can't make vitamin C, and it can't, and so on and so forth. So that's what I do on a pretty much everyday basis. Keeps me occupied.
So you're a hub, Bernie. So Bernie, go back a little bit. So for our listeners who just sort of caught the tail end of this, you're a hub, a one-stop shop of networking, having individuals working with you who specialize in different areas than you do. All right. Are you focused on ingredients as a consulting group, or are you focused on CPG, finished retail products, helping companies, or both?
I focus on the entire spectrum, Stephen. I guess you could say I focus on innovation and all that implies. So it could be ingredients where a company has developed a novel ingredient where it not only needs to be promoted to a mass audience, but aligned with an appropriate first mover. And there are some things like that in the digestive health space. There are some things like that in the antioxidant space. There are some things like that are unique in the what I'll call superfood space. It could run the entire spectrum, and it does.
Right. So let's think about this here. Companies that want to come into the marketplace, where they have a science-based ingredient, they spent all this money on research, right? And they have this, the studies to show the ingredient, but they don't have money left over for marketing. What do you do with companies like that?
You align them with what I would call the selfish island. And the selfish island is not trying to sell something novel to everyone, but rather find that one company or individual or selfish island whose self-interest is best served by the innovation that the ingredient offers. And that could take on a lot of different forms. Recently, I was working with a company that had a unique technology to extract an immunoglobulin from egg yolk. And so the idea there was, let's find, because you're small and you can't afford to market it to everyone, let's find what company would be most benefited by being able to differentiate their brand or product or concept by the addition of your ingredient. So you're looking for first movers in cases like that. And the way you get to those first movers, I have my own network, but it could be through your network where I'll reach out to someone in the scientific community and say, are you working on a project where this particular ingredient or technology would, in your sphere, have a unique benefit? So instead of trying to advertise to everyone, I'm trying to chart a path to that end user or company that would have the greatest benefit by knowing about and having an early movement using this ingredient. So it could be something that goes into, like, let's say if you have colostrum and you want to do something novel with colostrum, you can amend it with this egg yolk extract. So colostrum has one immunoglobulin. You can amend it with this other one. So you're always looking for places where there is a fit for the user, as opposed to just trying to find a customer for the product. You're trying to find some place where there's synergy.
Yeah. It's kind of funny, because, I also, we look at delivery systems, right? 4 out of 10 people can't swallow pills, right? And also we have these delivery systems now out there. And, gummies is the big popular one at this point, and then we look at the sweeteners that they're now coming out and to replace sugars. And that's so important. So you've got to, and not every gummy company is the same, all right? Not all encapsulation companies are the same, because each one uses different encapsulating machines, right? High-speed, automatic, Italian, German, right? They're all different, right? But the point is that these science-based ingredients, as Joe Bradley would say on Step Change, they're the hardest thing to sell, hardest thing to move into the industry, because there's a price point that you have to be at, right, to hit mass market. And so maybe, some of these expensive ingredients the consumer never sees, right, at the store level. And it's a shame.
Yeah, well, it's a shame. And the challenge is that I try to make sure I have adequate altitude to see broadly over the horizon. So I may call up a company I have no relationship with at all and say, as I've done with a company that's entering into a ready-to-drink market, and just call them up and say, I've been at this for 49 years. I've seen where other products like what you're doing have failed, and I have some insights for you that I'd like to share, and without charge. It's just say, hey, if you're interested, let's have a conversation, because I can give them perspective. It goes back to my great success stories in the history of failure. There are things that companies coming into a market based on better sameness are not going to see in the way they approach the market. So I'll call somebody up and say, you've got the same raw materials as everybody else. Would you be interested in knowing that there are sweetening systems that are novel that you can utilize in a complementary way? It's like there's one called Brazine. Brazine is a sweet peptide. It's 5,000 times sweeter than sugar. But the problem with Brazine is you need like a molecule to sweeten something, and so it presents production problems. So there are companies that are now co-blending, if you will, this Brazine with something like Reb M or stevia or something. So you wind up with something that's 1,000 times sweeter, but which is functional, putting it into a product. Those are the kinds of projects that I like, because it creates an opportunity to find find the right haystack, to make sure that you're looking in the right haystack for the needle, because most fields are full of a lot of haystacks, and there's only a needle in one.
So Bernie, just talk about that ingredient on the sweetener side, because Pure Brand's one of our sponsors, and they're king of stevia, and so since 2008, Benjamin Fleischman, it's like David versus Goliath story here, and we had him on, we've interviewed him. So, but people, they think of stevia, they think of that aftertaste of stevia, and have you found a solution to eliminate that aftertaste with this ingredient that you're talking about?
Yeah, there are solutions. First it was in breaking up the stevia sides, and then focusing on Reb M, and then all of a sudden, Cargill started fermenting Reb M from bacteria or something. So it's always going to be challenging. And what I would do with stevia is, high-intensity sweeteners are very nice for some products, but high-intensity sweeteners in functional foods aren't always the best solution because there's something that comes from a natural sweetener. So there's a sweetener that comes out of Central America. It's called polycane, and this is a large sugar producer that has figured out if they spray dry pure organic cane juice, they can retain all of the cardiovascular beneficial components called polycosanols. And so now you have a sugar that you can use a small amount of in concert with something like stevia or one of the stevia sides. And now you can make a combination where if you're only focused on your one dimension, then you have limitations in what you can do with it because it doesn't fit in every situation. So sometimes for an ingredient supplier, the answer may be in a collaborative effort with somebody who otherwise wouldn't be competitive in your space and in whose space you might not otherwise be competitive either.
Yeah. Well, we know that Pure's in Walmart. All right, they're in Sprouts. They're right across the retail space, and they've done very well for themselves. But if they're crossing over to the dietary supplement market, which is what they're doing now, they need someone like you to talk to them. All right, and and this is where your business, if you're not out there showcasing who you're like, you always got to be out there promoting your customers that you have. And or else no one's going to find you, right? And how important is the marketing side of your business?
It's almost entirely word of mouth, in the sense that on LinkedIn I have almost 5,000 first-level contacts. So I can post something on LinkedIn like I did with Whole Foods magazine, and I can get it in front of 4,000 people. And if you include second level, I think it's closer to 1 million. So I rely on that, and also the network, the reach of the network that I work with, because it's not only starting with me. It may start, for example, with the researchers at Texas A&M, or it may start with with the scientists at UC Irvine, or it may start with a contract manufacturer, all of whom are people that I sort of co-market with. They're doing something exceptional, so if I can find an exceptional product and bring it to them, they can then turn around and bring it to one of their large players. The challenge, Stephen, is that most companies rely on magnitude of sales as a measure of success. And in my mind, the only way to get large magnitude sales is to shift the paradigm for somebody who can gain an early unique benefit from what they have, because once they develop something that has a home, it would tend to grow dramatically. It's like when Oat Bran was pioneered for Health Valley, and we grew from $12 million to $150 million. And then within 3 years, there were like 500 or 1,000 Oat Bran products. And then there was a study out of Harvard that said oat bran doesn't lower cholesterol, and all of a sudden nobody was making any money. So we went and we sold fat-free foods. And, this is the cycle of demons and deities, and the problem with relying on any one thing to be more than a 4 to 6 year solution. Then what you have to do is you have to find ways to align that previous next big thing in ways that other people haven't done it. For example, right now, probably, I would say, maybe 7 to 10 years ago, there was a book published called The Ultimate Predator. It was written by Dr. Stephanie Strafty, and she's a professor in immunological whatever, down at UC San Diego. And it's a story of how her husband and her were in Egypt on a holiday, and he became ill, and it turned out that he was infected with a bacteria that was resistant to virtually every strain of antibiotic ever discovered. And miraculously, she stumbled on some old research from the Eastern Bloc about the use of viral particles called bacteriophages. And in a very short period of time, miraculously, she pulled together an international group of experts, which wasn't a lot, and they came up with a cocktail of these things, and her husband was saved literally moments from death. So then all of a sudden there was a focus on bacteriophages. What I did is I put them in a gut health product for one small customer so that there would be a proof of concept. Because if nobody is shifting the paradigm to incorporate a novel ingredient on a small level, it's almost impossible to scale it on a large level. And so that's one way that I go about doing things. You find the path of least resistance, or if you will, the selfish island, and know that somebody is going to run it up the flagpole, and then everyone else will follow. So you have to be careful that you have a good flag and that you have a good flagpole.
Yeah, and you have a good timeline, because a lot of companies just want to do 6 months and see what you can do, and then that's it. All right, next thing you know, they want to see results. And I tell people you're not going to get results in 6 months. It's going to take a year, maybe 2 years to get your first sale in our industry.
And you know what, Stephen, to sort of jump over to this next topic of MLMs, or direct selling companies, they now call them. These have been some of the most productive points of entry for products that did not have general acceptance. I mean, you go and you look at the long-standing ones like Amway and Nutrilite and Herbalife and so on and so forth. They've stood the test of time, and it's because they produce good products consistently for a global consumer. But companies like Monavie, that grew from nothing to $1 billion in revenue in the 4th year on the back of acai berries. Nobody else was doing anything with acai berries, and they figured out how to take that, turn a unique berry from South America, where all of them had coming from Asia or the Pacific, and turn it into an opportunity for a direct selling company that scaled enormously quickly. Because in MLM, which I'm sure you know, distributors tend to be somewhat mobile over time. If they're not making a lot of money with one thing, then they may jump over to something else because they feel like the early stage of an MLM may be the one where they have the greatest opportunity to prosper financially. So it's a really interesting situation, and it creates one where the MLM companies have been and continue to be a very fertile location for scalable new concepts before they scale.
All right. Peter, do you have a question on MLM for Bernie?
No, it sounds like Bernie's got a lot of experience in that area and certainly super knowledgeable. And thanks for pointing out that MLM products could bring, or MLM companies rather, can bring a product to the market probably faster than anybody else. So that's kind of a neat thing. And of course, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly. We could talk about some other time as well. But thanks for pointing that out for sure.
Yeah.
And Bernie, just real quick, I want to go back to something you said a little bit earlier. A lot of us don't know that words like healthy or health, or organic or natural, there's actually people that write the definitions of those words. And it sounds like you were part of some of that stuff as well. And Jim Turner, who I referenced.
Jim Turner, the people at Citizens for Health were remarkable. Jim Turner was running that, but his operations director, Susan, was equally remarkable. And they mobilized consumers in a way that they hadn't been mobilized since the Vietnam War. So that was quite remarkable. But the interesting thing was that the Nutrition Labeling and Education Act of 1990, this is where a study of regulatory history is so valuable. It created descriptors and put parameters on descriptors. The two that I worked on directly were fat-free and healthy. Organic came later, and I actually had an opportunity to testify in the U.S. Congress on the future of organic foods, while I was still at Health Valley. But organic was a collaborative concept that was developed. Fat-free, there was no definition for fat-free. All of the testing methods were arcane, and nobody knew how to figure it out, and they'd only been used to measure fat and meat. So we had to actually develop a whole new testing methodology and sell that to both FDA and FTC before they adopted the standard for fat-free at the level that actually turned out beneficial for Health Valley, which was 0.5 grams of fat per serving, and a way to measure it. Healthy was the next evolution because all of the other terms had pretty much been created and defined. But healthy was problematic, and there was no clear-cut definition of what the word meant. So once they had the Nutrition Labeling Act and descriptors, and they figured out what high and low and source of and so forth, then the question became, well, what's healthy? And so the end result was it had to have both positive elements and be free of negative elements. And so over a period of time, we helped create that. It was ultimately adopted as the initial definition of the word healthy. And as luck would have it, Health Valley was the only company in the world that had every single product that complied with the definition. And it was serendipitous that we did, but knowing where the regulators were going with their thinking gave us an opportunity over time to move our product characteristics in the direction we knew eventually it would go, which were low in fat, high in fiber, producing significant levels of one of four different nutrients, and being limited in sodium, because all of those things had been in direct relationship. They were part of government education programs over the prior 25, 30 years, starting with the National Hypertension Control Education Act in 1976-77, which said salt is bad. Then Kellogg's and the National Cancer Institute pioneered the idea of insoluble fiber, reducing the risk of colon cancer. And then the National Cholesterol Education Program came along, and that opened up the opportunity for oat bran and figuring out how much oat bran was going to be acceptable. And then after that, the government decided that fat was bad. So all of these things created a continuum over the years that I was working on that allowed Health Valley, in that case, to evolve their product line in ways that maintained their naturalness, but were shifted in terms of nutrient content to align where the government was going. And, today it's a little bit less certain because those were the basic things. I think they're going to redefine healthy. They're going to redefine what a dietary substance is. There are still some of those things where groups can influence the regulatory environment, but not so much individuals or single companies. Those were unique times, and that's how that all came about.
These are fascinating conversations about things that a lot of us didn't know were happening. So one of these days we have to have you come back and talk to us about, these days, because you were part of that whole thing with people like Jim Turner over at Citizens, that I find these conversations just fascinating. I mean, there's actually people that decide what natural means or what healthy is. I mean, most of us in the consumer market, well, of course, certain things are healthy or not. We throw the phrases around as if they're just casual phrases, of course, but not. That's so important in the stuff that you did before that.
They're not. And Peter, one thing I would suggest, because we still default to natural products as being the defining term related to our industry. When I set up my consulting company 25 years ago, I specifically called it nutritional products, because nutritional products, certainly in the context of dietary supplements, aren't all natural. They may start from some natural source, but if you look at fermented dietary supplements, they're genetically modified E. coli bacteria that are fermented. So they're nutritional for sure. They add nutritional value, but absent a clear definition of what's natural, it really winds up, to me, being somewhat more confusing than the word nutritional, because everybody knows they need to improve their nutrition, but not everybody knows how they can do it only with natural products.
Great points. Stephen, we have to have him come back and explain this more.
No, absolutely.
Lots of us are very anxious to hear this stuff and where it's going. So the other question is that you mentioned it's kind of like a fluid situation, is where is it going in the future? And we don't have to talk about this today. I want to have you come back. But the reality is what does the future look like with all of the stuff that's going on? And I know we're running out of time probably, but you got artificial intelligence, whether it comes to all the things that it can do positively or negatively, where that's going to fit into the mix as well.
So I can give you a real quick answer on both of those things. Where things are going, at least from where I sit, is defined in two words: systems biology. That we're going to evolve away from looking at a situational solution to some sort of dysfunction, to going to optimizing biological systems in ways that incorporate multiple different biological pathways and put into products that consumers can easily understand. And that falls into the things like anti-aging and things of that sort, where it's getting so complicated that nobody really understands what anybody is talking about. In terms of AI is only, to me, as good as the questions you ask it. Because right now, even though it can do some creative thinking, it's reliant on all of the recorded knowledge of human history. And not everything in human history has been recorded. And so it's still trying to put a puzzle together and create a box cover for all the puzzle pieces, but all the pieces may not necessarily be known. So I think over time we're going to see it evolve in ways that will be tremendously beneficial, but I think we're also going to see what I would call precision nutrition evolve, to where people have a better understanding of their biological systems. If you will, in the case of some systems, some of these problems that humans have that cause long-term disease or dysfunction are what I call hardware problems. There are things the body would like to be able to make or do, but because of design flaws, if you will. We got a hardware problem. And if you have a broken computer, no amount of software is going to make the basic flaw in the computer's operation fix the problem. You're going to wind up with a continuous flow of Band-Aids as opposed to a foundational solution. That's why I think as time goes on, we need to find a path to simplicity and to getting back to foundational approaches to good nutrition. That's why I created this nutrition continuum, which is on my LinkedIn homepage. And it starts with whole foods that are organically or biodynamically grown, that are minimally processed without the use of processing aids or any of the 1,952 GRAS ingredients that give you a foundation to start from, and that are amended with foods produced the same way, but that have unique nutrient density, followed by extracts of those foods, followed by basic vitamins, and eventually followed by situational solutions that can be addressed much better if you have the foundation from the first 4 steps. So I think we're going to start finding better ways to look at nutrition instead of always trying to fix something that's broken, and go back to the beginning and figure out how to get the greatest density and diversity of nutrients with the fewest number of calories. Because if you can do that, you're golden, because that's really the goal. And if you have the greatest nutrient density with the fewest calories, then some of the issues with obesity, which is now a recognized health condition, so that pharmaceutical companies can say if you have obesity, they used to say if you're overweight. Now they say if you have obesity, now you can take a drug. I think we're going to find a renaissance of healthy eating that helps to reduce the incidence of some of these long-term chronic diseases. And some of those problems can be solved in finding these hardware problems, making sure that the things the body was designed to do but can't do because of some flaw are corrected. And I'm working on some of those things as well. So anyway, long answer, but that's where I see it all going.
Great answer. Thank you. Stephen, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I just a couple more questions for Bernie if he has time with us. I want to look at leadership, right? Leadership, right? The importance of leadership, right? And what qualities you think today, right, for our younger generation who are listening to this radio podcast, make a good leader for them to thrive in a working environment?
I think that leadership requires a willingness to listen and to share. A dictator is somebody who puts himself as all-knowing and tells people what to do. A leader is somebody who has experience and helps those who they work with or those who they guide to understand the why and to be comfortable with the what if in a way that doesn't challenge their willingness or their ability to imagine. I think that's the very best thing. A good leader has a history of success, but understands that times are constantly changing and that the ability to foster creative thinking and innovation is probably one of the greatest tools a leader can have. And if we look at our great political leaders, they organize great teams of people to take on difficult, if not impossible, tasks. And they have the ability to coordinate diverse skills and abilities into a coherent team. It's kind of like, a coach in football or a manager in baseball, where if you got, or even a great conductor of an orchestra, which is probably the best example. If you have a great piece of music somebody's composed, and you walk in a room and you hand it to 20 of the greatest musicians in the world, and you say, play this, more likely than not, you're going to get noise. So what you do is you find a great conductor who can take that musical score and organize these great musicians into a coherent symphony orchestra. And that's, to me, that's the greatest skill of leadership.
Yeah, thank you for that, because I think we all have potential talent, and it really is that person that can bring out the potential in all of us that is hidden inside, because a lot of people, we just need support and words of encouragement, and that allow us to be the wind beneath our wings, right? And to reach higher heights.
And to be comfortable knowing that progress is not a straight vertical line. Progress sometimes is surging ahead, falling back a little bit to gather your wits, and then surging to the next higher point than the one you had surged to before. And when you look at that, sometimes under great leadership, your worst days are significantly better than your best days were a year or 2 years in the past. And if you can accept the fact that progress and success isn't always a straight line or a straight trajectory, that if you don't take time to review what you've done, it's the same thing with sports. It's like if a runner runs a 10-second 100-yard dash, and then he wants to go out the next time and run a 9.8-second 100-yard dash. Well, if he doesn't take a break from the 10-second dash, maybe even to fall back to 11 seconds, he's never going to be able to go back beyond where he was before. So you have to be able to accept a trajectory that has ups that are higher than before, and downs that aren't as low as the last time you went back. Kind of like the stock market, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's a casino attached to a church, right?
Yeah, there you go. I think it's a good thing for anybody who wants to have long-term success, because otherwise, things don't go your way one day. It doesn't mean they're not going to go your way tomorrow. You have to, and that's where leaders come in handy, and are so important, because they can get you through the times when you fall back from where you were before by convincing you and leading you to persist, so that you can head back up in a positive direction and go even beyond where you were the last time you were at the peak.
I agree with you there. To me, I think you and I are more valued today because of our wisdom and our experience and our relationships we've developed with people, because we've gone through the trenches. We've seen good people come and go in our life. They're not with us now. We've seen companies that fail because of bad management. We've seen greed. We've seen arrogance. We've seen stupidity. Right, where people think they can just come into our industry and bulldoze and wade through, right, and treat people as a dollar sign first. So you're absolutely right, and those people are generally proponents of the next big thing, and some of them come along at the right time, and no matter how, let's say, unpopular they may be as persons, their timing is amazing, and they reap extraordinary rewards. What they do after that, who knows? But, there have been people who have not been what I would call the greatest leaders, but they've been great innovators. And by the time people figured out that
They were not the most pleasant people in the world. Either they acquired enormous wealth, or they acquired enormous wealth and then lost most of it.
Yeah. Well, it's okay because they can't take it with them anyway. All right. So, at the end of the day, they're just borrowing it. Right. So, that's why I'm never impressed by what people have, how much people have made or what they purchase. I look at what they've contributed to this world, how they made a difference and an impact to other people's lives.
My mom used to say to me, "We become too soon old and too late smart." And I think those are good words to live by. If you never are satisfied with, you never lose your curiosity or your thirst for new knowledge. You become a much more interesting person and ultimately a great leader. But great military leaders have the ability to rally troops around them against a common goal, which may or not be necessarily in alignment with the troops, but which the troops believe is worthy of pursuing because of their belief in the leader.
Well, they trust and respect that leader, right? That's the thing.
Yes.
And, there's no, the worst thing I see in a person is when they talk out of two sides of their mouth. Right? They say what you want to hear, and then their actions are different. Right? And and I see that. And I don't know how to teach people how to avoid that. Right? And because they don't have that gift of discernment. Not everybody's blessed that way.
You accept the fact that, like I used to say in dating, although I wasn't very good at it, many are interviewed and few are chosen. And it's the same way when you're in a situation where you can lead or where you can guide. Not everyone is leadable, and not everyone is guidable. And so you put out I guess the my 1 hour rule, and you tell people what you think and what you've learned and how you might approach a situation. And some people will say thank you and you'll never hear from them again. And other people will call and you just have to know that many are interviewed and few are chosen. Not everybody can be a leader. Not everybody can be a success.
But also, we had Brian McNally on, and he always, he gave us good memory of, if you promise something, deliver. Like, keep your word. Mm-hmm. Don't go back on your word, right? And I think that's so important as a leader.
Great.
And
it is, because in life there are only really two things that I've figured out: that if you lose them, you can't get them back. And nobody cares why you lost it. One is, of course, related to your behavior with the opposite sex. And the other is your integrity. Once you lose your integrity, it doesn't matter why. The excuses don't ever allow you to get it back again, at least almost never. So it's better not to lose it in the first place, which, to what you're saying, Peter, if you promise, keep your promise. And if you can't keep your promise, don't make it.
Right. Well, this is it. Honor your word, all right? And don't use people against people. That's what I see out there. Oh, someone doesn't like you, or, where you leverage other people who never even said anything, and you bring people in to avoid. Be honest. That's sometimes people avoid confrontation. I don't know why, all right? And they don't tell you the truth. And that goes on in the world. I just say be authentic, be real in this world, all right? And you'll be rewarded with karma, right? And, you have a bad day today, tomorrow's a good day, all right? You don't know, but just enjoy the gift of life, the blessings that are in front of you. I always look at that and thinking, you're not missing out. If you're so thankful and grateful for what you have in life.
And Peter, that's why you reached the heights.
Stephen.
Stephen.
Stephen. Yeah.
that you've pursued. And I still have a letter that a woman whose house I saved from foreclosure while I was working in the bank. She wrote to the president of the bank, thanking me for saving her home. It's those little aha experiences that reinforce and actually make doing the right thing worthwhile, because it's so much better to have good memories than to have memories you'd like to forget.
Yeah. I think you're right. It's like I look at my memories are treasured now because my gift is the gift of time, right? Every day when I wake up, it's a blessing, right? And I look back at what I was taught early in age, right? That be thankful for what you have, not what you don't. Don't chase things. Don't be materialistic, right? Because you can't measure the treasure in the bank account. You can measure the treasure in friendships and relationships, people who are with you. Right? Those are the greatest gifts in life.
Well, it's the gift of being alive. But if you ask AI to behave like a friend, I guess eventually it'll be able to respond like your best friend. But that's a ways off.
Yeah. Well, this has been an extraordinary interview with you, Bernie, because it's just been a natural flow of conversation, friendship, and it's an inspirational messages that you've been giving us, through your sacrifices and your servant leadership style, and because you've certainly have paved the way for a lot of us to have jobs today in the industry, and I thank you for that.
Well, Peter, I thank you for those kind words. And I have to say, the opportunity to have this kind of conversation is rare and it is treasured. And I appreciate it.
Well, okay. Well, I'll thank Peter because this is Stephen, Bernie. All right?
Peter's here, yep.
Peter.
No stolen valor.
You got closer to the phone. For a while you were in the distance. I thought we'd lost you. Well, Stephen,
okay.
I can only tell you that your signature sports coat is like the green jacket at the Masters. And maybe every year you should have a Stephen Lukawski award and award a red jacket.
Okay. I'm going to get you a red jacket because we're going to team up, Bernie. All right? We're going to be the Cran men, not the Cran man. All right? We're going to be the Cran men, all right? And because you and I can make a real amazing difference in the world if we work together, all right?
I'm sure we can.
I believe, we're the Cran man. The Cran man can, Sammy Davis Jr. All right.
I've got comic characters all drawn out that would be perfectly suited for Cran men. So I'll have to send you some of them, Stephen. You take a look-see.
That will be the Cranman group. The Cranman group.
Well, yeah, the superheroes. You guys are great. Stephen, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. It's been absolutely wonderful. I wish we'd had it before, but some things happen in the right time, and this certainly was. And I will treasure this conversation. Thank you.
You're welcome, and so are your children because they're going to get a link of this, and they're going to hear your voice in the future, and it'll be a keepsake for them in their treasured memoir. All right, you're welcome, Bernie.
Appreciate it. And go ahead.
Right. And to our listeners out there, I thank you so much for tuning in to KISC My Health and listening to Bernie's journey as he shares his success story with all of us. And remember, out there, please, all I'm asking you to do, if one day at a time, is just be kind and good to others, all right? And the world will smile with you, all right? So thank you so much for another great show on KISC My Health. Peter, take it away.
Perfect. Well, this has been a wonderful interview. Thank you so much, Bernie. And Stephen, thanks for setting this up as well. There is so much knowledge and so much more information I'd like to be able to pull from Bernie. We've got to have him back on another radio show. So for those people listening you just heard from him. That'd be great. And I'd love for you to blend in some of the stuff that you you did or knew about the Citizens for Health, because that's really the beginning of the beginning of the beginning of a lot of the things that we did over here. So great stories, and thanks so much for the help and your knowledge about, the industry is just so vast and so great. We're going to call it a radio show. Thanks, everybody, for listening in. Thanks to our corporate sponsors. And thanks for you, our listeners, both active and passive. Go share this with other people, and we'll see everybody next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
You've been listening to the KISC My Health radio show on Building Fortunes Radio. Thanks for listening. This KISC My Health radio show is brought to you by Stephen Lukawski. Stephen is known as the Cranberry King, universally known as Captain Cran Man. Stephen has over 30 years of experience working with manufacturers and marketers of dietary supplements and natural ingredients to make this world a healthier and a better place. You can check out Stephen Lukawski on LinkedIn and on the KISCMyHealth.com website. We are glad you listened in. Spread the word and check out previous KISC My Health radio episodes. Bye for now. It's been our privilege to have you listen in. At Building Fortunes Radio, we wish you the success you deserve and are willing to work for. Now go make the world a better place.